me, my meal was spaghetti. So for like 2-3 weeks, because it was, again, I barely worked enough just to get to Japan. And then at the time, the yen was stronger than the dollar. So all my money had already shrunk. Once I got that first paycheck, I was like, I'm never touching spaghetti again. But then I saw a random Facebook post say, you need to learn to code. These are free programs to help you do it. And so I was like, okay, well, I started with Khan Academy, and then I moved to like a jobs program that taught people how to code called 100 Devs. And that was the game changer right there.
Welcome to the Japan Dev Podcast. I am Eric, founder of JapanDev.com, and today I am super excited to be chatting with Sulaymane, who is a software engineer now working in Japan, but he's from the US originally. He's been in Japan for about 13 years, and I'm super excited to kind of jump into this discussion and see how he made it to Japan from the US and actually went from being an English teacher to now a front-end engineer at a top tech company. So we're going to see how that journey went, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think your story is super unique, so I'm really excited to jump into it. But let's just start off, I guess, talking a little bit about how you got to Japan in the first place. I think it's pretty similar to my own story, actually, and also a similar timeline. So I'm super interested in kind of your motivations. But I saw that you began as an English teacher and through an Eikaiwa, so English language teaching school. And so I saw that also you graduated from Bucknell University back in 2012, is that right?
Yeah. Right.
And then you immediately came to Japan. So my question is, like, what was kind of going through your head at that time that made you decide, okay, I'm going to the other side of the earth to work as an English teacher in Japan? Like, what was it that made you decide to make that move?
I actually came on a random trip here in 2011. I had called up my boy one day and I was like, I need something in my life just to wake me up, I guess. I felt like I was in college, I wanted something different. And so I was like, yeah, well, let's just go to Japan. And he was like, all right, cool. So in 2011, I came with him and another friend. And one of the hostels we stayed at had we met a person at a karaoke who was already working in Japan for what would initially become my first opportunity here. So we were kicking it and chilling. We had a great time. We made connections. I go back to the States. I start thinking about, what am I going to do? This is my senior year now. What's the future holding? So I reach out to that person that I met and I was like, would you mind writing me a recommendation for your company? And he was like, sure, why not? So I was like, cool, yes. So I started going through the application process with his recommendation as well. And it was quite a long ordeal, a couple of months actually. But eventually, through that connection, I got to the last stage of the interview, and then they were like, okay, let's go. And so I was like, yes, all right, well, this is the opportunity I have. I hadn't really looked at anything else, and it was on the table. I didn't know how long I would stay, but I was just like, okay, well, I've got a job now. It is in Japan, but I got a job. So then I decided, okay, went through the application process for getting the COE, just a document to say you can come to Japan and work here. So I got that in about June of that year. And then while I was working summer job in between, I had a summer internship, which helped me pay for my flight. And then that August, I came over. I started out up in Nagoya, had some training in Nagoya. And then my initial site was down in Wakayama. So I was there. I started there and was been living there until 2018 before I moved up to Osaka.
Wow. That's awesome. So when you graduated, so you had a degree in economics.
Yeah.
The typical path from that point is to look around, maybe more locally, or at least in the same country, somewhere in the US. But I don't know, was there any kind of deeper reason, do you think, like, that made you look? I mean, I guess you had gone to Japan the previous year, and I guess obviously it made an impression on you, and that is what like directly led to it. But there wasn't any kind of like deeper reasoning behind it, where like I guess like in my case, I did the same thing. I graduated from school and immediately moved over here, and it was like, I think I just didn't quite feel ready to like embark on my career, just knowing that, like, you know what I mean, like at like 22 years old and just being like, yeah, this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 40 years until I retire. Like, this is my life now. And I just wanted like maybe one last hurrah, I guess, before like becoming an adult or whatever. Was that part of it for you also, or was it just like kind of a random thing?
No, I think one of the big motivations that I had was like I just needed a job. I felt like I needed, in my culture, in my family, okay, you go to school, you go to college, and then initially it would have been postgraduate degree, but this opportunity came up, so okay, so I'm going to work. So I think I had a pressure to not have a gap between schooling and working full time. And so initially, about the time when I was looking for opportunities, others in my, I guess, my field were already at career fairs and things like that. And I didn't really have, I guess, mentors to say, hey, maybe you should go to these things. Like maybe these could help you benefit and create something for your post after you graduate. So I didn't have that mindset. I just said, okay, I felt like I was going to be late in between after graduating into, that's why after graduating, I had maybe a couple weeks, maybe a week before my internship started. And then during the internship, I left to Japan. So I'm all like back to back to back to back to back. Everything has to stay consistent. I'm not sure where it comes from. Like I said, it's probably just pressure from family and home and just like my own desire to do it. And so then when they say yes, I was like, okay, well, that's it. I'm out.
I see. Wow.
So I think that was the biggest motivation for it. And then I guess a bit more independent after, even though I was away at school, you still came home, right?
Yeah.
But now I need to be out on my own and start to learn how to do things as an adult. I'm still navigating that too part though.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess, so the Japan thing was just the most immediate option that you saw of like, I have this referral already, the job, it's like a done deal pretty much. I can just go and avoid having any kind of downtime where I'm not sure I'll be able to find the next thing or whatever. And you just went for it.
Yeah, pretty much that's it.
Yeah.
And I haven't gone back for a while.
Right, because it's been 13 years now. Yeah. So you must have, it must not have been too bad of a place to live because you're quite a while now.
Yeah. I think being here, you turn off a lot of the, I guess, what is it, like those, I don't know, back home, you always looking around, you never know. But here you're just kind of like, oh, butterflies. And it's nice you get used to having that, I guess, that sense kind of on low alert level, kind of like yellow or green. You know?
Yeah.
So and then healthcare, hey, that helps. Right?
It's funny, like when people ask me the question of like, why Japan? Like that's the first thing that comes to mind for me too. It's like just the carefree lifestyle. You hear that it's safe and all these things, but it's just like when you're actually living it day to day, you just realize, and especially when you go back to the U.S. and you see the contrast, and you remind yourself like, oh, wow, I have to like watch my back when I'm in these places or whatever. Not all the time necessarily, not everywhere, but like it's a different kind of like attitude that you need to have day to day. And I don't miss that.
Right.
It is
exactly
something that I truly do appreciate so much about Japan. So that's awesome. But yeah, so you moved initially to Wakayama Prefecture and you were working as an Eikaiwa English teacher. Right. So I guess what was it like actually getting kind of accustomed to life in Japan? Were there any pitfalls, any issues, just doing all the stuff like when it comes to like finding an apartment and all that kind of stuff to just get established here? Was that a pretty smooth process, or did you have some bumps?
It was not. It was the company that I was working for at the time. They first initially set you up with your apartment, which is nice for those people who are coming here for the first time. Okay. Right. They also had some very strict guidelines about how you should be at the company, and they had some very strict guidelines about how they want to present their employees and things like that. And they were too strict to a certain point where I was like, okay, well, you guys are asking for more of my time than I'm willing to offer. And so that kind of got me starting, okay, I have to get out this company apartment. So I needed, luckily in Wakayama, I was able to find a nice solid group of people who were supportive and who would help me say, hey, I need to find a space to anybody. So I had some people who were able to take me around to some different places. And okay, so I got out the company apartment. And so that's when I started to kind of like really be on my own. Because I think having the safety net of like, okay, with the company, they got my apartment. I'm kind of just like coasting essentially. I do my job and I come home, however difficult that might be. But now I'm like, okay, no, if I don't pay the bill, the lights are off.
Right.
So those those have been some challenging things to go through. Like just getting more into that adulting kind of thing. Like, okay, the house, nobody's going to clean it, right? Nobody's going to take care of anything for you. You got to do these things. And so luckily I still had, my apartment was close enough to that community who were supportive and whatnot. And they also English speaking community as well, which was really nice. So I think leaving that company apartment, being able to establish myself, as well as having that community kind of allowed me to stay here a lot longer than I would have had I been dropped in a place that has no name, right?
Right.
So yeah, it was quite difficult, challenging in the beginning, but eventually, because of those factors, it kind of smoothed its way out.
I see. So were those fellow English teachers, or how did you kind of find that community that you mentioned?
Oh yeah, actually, I can shout out in Wakayama. There's there's a bar.
Okay.
It's called Dance Bar. And at Dan's bar, Dan's been living in Japan for 30 some odd years. And so he's been like a kind of like a staple in that community for other English teachers in the area, as well as just other travelers. So being able to go there and start there Dan has been supportive. Then people that you meet are also English speakers who are also Japanese as well. So that really helped as well. It's not just people, all English teachers together. It's like we've got English speaking Japanese nationals who are friendly and whatnot, and we're really supportive. Like, hey, you need something, let's go to this place. Or I went to this prefecture, here's the gift, things like that. And they kind of like, oh, this is really nice. I like this. And so it kind of helped me stay. I think that's about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had a pretty similar experience in Toyama Prefecture, where there were not a lot of foreigners, but there were one or two similar kind of establishments, actually, like some bar. It's run by, again, like some guy from New Zealand who's just been in Japan for like several decades. And there's usually at least like a JET chapter or some sort of group of like English teachers or those types of people who can help a lot, I think, with a lot of the day-to-day stuff just when you're trying to get established there. So yeah, you might be surprised if you look around the vast majority of places. I mean, thanks in part to the kind of English teaching network, the ALTs and the ACOs and everything are pretty much everywhere throughout the country. So you can pretty much find that almost anywhere, I think, in Japan. And if you reach out and ask for help, you can pretty much get it, I think. So it's kind of great. But I'm glad that you were able to find that and were able to stick around. I think I can definitely relate to the whole learning how to be an adult thing in Japan. I similar experiences where it's like you don't know how to pay your electric bill. Sometimes you don't have money to pay the electric bill, right? Even if the trick of just going to the konbini to pay it or whatever you have to do. Maybe it's easier now, but back in the day you had to physically go and scan the barcode, right?
Yeah. And, don't miss it. Don't miss that cutoff date.
Exactly. And I remember trying to figure all that stuff out, and I don't know, I had a little bit of a shock, to be honest, like when I was starting to get mail and it was all in Japanese and I was just there alone in the apartment and I realized like, wow, like I don't know what's going on. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. And I don't know, that also gave me motivation to work hard with the language too. But would you say that the language barrier was a big issue early on or no?
Yeah. Okay. And to be honest, it still is to some degree now that I'm working in a completely Japanese environment, which is a first for me. But yeah, I definitely think that early on, I think I relied a lot on people who could speak Japanese to help me through this. And I think that might have been a crutch early on. That might have hindered my Japanese learning ability a bit. But yeah, definitely seeing my name written in katakana bills. And so I will say my first company did walk me through, this is where you go. We're going to get you a cell phone. We're going to open up a bank account. We're going to register your address. So they set all that up. And so I think I kind of had an idea of how I can do certain basic things, but eventually, like once being on the own, sometimes you get some mail. In the first year, you don't get the national health insurance mails because you don't have any salary. But then once you come into what is this big thick thing coming through? So just trying to navigate that. It's like, now you got to go there every month and just go to a comedian and pay that. So and also, were you around when ATMs closed around holidays?
Yes. Yeah. I have literally run out of money in Japan and been essentially destitute and just had some number of days where it's like, okay, I have some rice and water. I'm not going to literally die. And hopefully I can access my bank account again once the golden weekends, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were crazy days.
And I also resonate with that destitute part because early on, you get to Japan and hey, by the way, you get paid once a month.
Yep.
What? Yeah. So that was my first big shock. And
it's offset by a month, right? So you finish, you do a month of work and then have to wait another month to get that first paycheck. Yeah, that period was tough.
Oh man, it was so for me, my meal was spaghetti. So for 2-3 weeks, because it was, again, I barely worked enough just to get to Japan. And then at the time, the yen was stronger than the dollar. So all my money had already shrunk. And then just trying to get through it to the next month. So again, spaghetti, they had the 100 yen Lawson's near my place. So nice. I would have a pack of spaghetti and the meat sauce. Yep. And that would be my dinner for weeks on end. And so even my lunch would be peanuts and Coke, and I just let that hang out because it helps you not think about hunger. So you get peanuts, Coke, you get home, you get your spaghetti, and that was it for weeks. And once I got that first paycheck, I was like, I'm never touching spaghetti again. Yeah,
because once you get the first one, it's fine.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but when it's a hard first one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had that same experience, but yeah, you got through it though. And even you changed jobs a few times. I guess you experienced a few different companies when you were doing the English teaching, and you ultimately ended up in Kansai in Osaka, right? What made you gravitate toward Kansai and Osaka specifically? What made you decide to move there?
Well, so I was when my Wakayama is still considered part of Kansai, so
Okay. Yeah,
I was
that's
there.
right. Yeah.
And then while I was working for my previous employer, I had met up someone who would eventually become my wife. And so she lived in Osaka. So then I ended up after closing out all the things down in the Wakayamas, and once I decided that this is the person I want to spend my life with, I moved up to Osaka. So yeah, that's I wouldn't know if I was placed anywhere else would I have gone down to Osaka, but or Wakayama or Kansai at all. But I'm glad that's where the starting part was, because I think I'm biased towards Kansai over Kanto. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, everyone who lives in Osaka seems to absolutely love it. Whenever there's like a thread on Reddit or Twitter or whatever of like, which one's better, Tokyo or Osaka? I feel like everyone always says Osaka. So
yeah, it's loosey goosey down here. Like
yeah, that's what people say. Like people are a lot warmer. There's easier to like kind of interact with people and stuff. Whereas Tokyo can feel a bit overwhelming, maybe a bit cold at times. From
that's
what
always my
people say.
experience. It's like people here are quite like too into their own world. I think Kansai and Osaka, you got the older generation who's like, "Yeah, come on over here, man." I've had some experiences where I've been walking. They've had large festivals, and I just get kidnapped into a festival, or essentially by some old people. I'm like, "Hey, had to drink this." Okay, let's go.
Yeah, admittedly, that you don't see that much in Tokyo, I would say. I don't know. There are a lot of different areas and neighborhoods and stuff, and maybe there are places where that kind of thing does happen. But yeah, that sounds really cool though. So, I mean, you've been there ever since. You never think about moving out to another area or trying the Tokyo thing to see what about the tech companies here or whatever. You feel like you're happy there in Osaka.
Yeah, I think with the living situation of having 4 children, it's kind of difficult so perhaps in sometime in the future, if once the littlest one graduates high school, then maybe. But for now, we've built our own community here. The children are starting to go to school, so it's just it'd be difficult to move out. And then like for the amount of effort to move versus the benefit that you gain from moving, I don't think it might not be in the future for a while.
Right. Yeah, so you mentioned you had 4 kids. So that is quite rare in Japan. I don't come across people with families that big very often. So I guess I do want to maybe talk a little bit about how that experience has been. But yeah, so your oldest right now is how old?
14.
14. Okay, so 4 kids. The oldest is 14. What was it like, I guess, kind of raising them in Japan as a non-Japanese person, but with a Japanese spouse? Like, yeah, I guess I don't know exactly what specifically I want to know, but it's more just like, what was it like?
So I think it was quite challenging. Well, to start, when I met my wife, she had already had the 2 kids at the time. At the time they were 5 and 3.
Okay.
And so I've been with them since about that time.
Okay.
And then once the oldest was 12, that's when the third was born.
Okay.
And so, but it has been difficult. Not difficult. It's been, to be honest, it's been enlightening. But it's been difficult for me because there are things that I would see that would either contradict my culture or what I'd be used to. And so early on in the stages of our relationship, we had to be like, okay, wait. I realize that there are normals that we both have that we need to allow each other to have, right? And then once we allow each other to have it, we can see, oh, he's not doing that because like he purposely wants to offend, or he purposely wants to do something like perhaps that was but now we had to talk about it. Say, hey, we can't do this because of this reason. And so in the beginning, it was trying to have those conversations where you think that something that you might think is okay, or like you wouldn't have that kind of thought process about, might be something that is a big issue.
Right.
So I think it was navigating those challenges while still allowing each other to be each other. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think the things that I'm accustomed to and the things that I just assume are normal are not the same thing that my wife would. And so just allowing us to have that first initial space, right? And then going from there, because you can't help how you react, right?
Right.
You know, in certain cultures, it might be rude if you serve your son before you serve the husband, right? Or it might be rude for you to talk to someone who's not your wife, talk to another person who's not your wife. So I'm just using those as random examples, but to say like there are certain places and things that do things a certain way that once you come to a blended family or international relationship that you have to, you can see what the other person's doing. It's like, wait a minute. So yeah, so that was a bit in navigating through that, as well as again just see in childhood and child rearing. I'm lucky to have the wife that I have because the way that she rears her children is full of love and full of care in a way that when they make a mistake, they talk a lot. I had that growing up, and so it was just like seeing that. And also initially, it's like, you can do that. Like, And so also having that kind of growth, seeing another person the way that she raises them, and then trying to adjust accordingly, because it's like, oh, wait, maybe the way that I had received it is not the best way to have received it, regardless of the outcome and regardless of the successes that happen, that maybe perhaps there's a different way to do things. And so it was allowing myself to not keep that, I guess, the ego, or that not allowing myself the room to grow. It took a while, but eventually we got there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think in an international kind of relationship, there's always this need to find a balance between the two cultures. And yeah, your point about like allowing yourself to like have that moment of like surprise, or like maybe like some negative thoughts creeping in at the beginning, but then being able to step back and think about like, okay, they do it this way, we do it this way. Maybe there's some middle ground between the two, or we can kind of like, we can find the best parts of both cultures ideally, right? And yeah, I think that's especially important when it comes to raising kids. And there are actually a lot of differences in some of that stuff too, from what I understand. So it must take a lot of work.
I think we're on the same page now. We've been together for a while, and I've experienced two births firsthand, and just how that also allowed us to grow and connect, and allowed me to see more of her, and allowed me to think beyond what I might have just been taught and what I might have just assumed was the right way to do it, just because everybody did it.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I think it sounds like you have a really great kind of situation there. Do you ever think about maybe like moving abroad for a bit, or maybe going back to the States to kind of allow the kids also to experience your culture? Or is that something that you think about, or are you just super happy to have everyone here in Japan? You feel like Japan's a great place to kind of raise them?
I definitely want the youngest two to go back to the States for a while. The older two, I've taken them back in 2019. I met the family, had a nice little wedding ceremony, the wedding party. So they got to experience what it's like. We went to New York and we went to DC, and so they got to see it. But I like that for the younger two as well. But we all have gone to Australia, because her mother lives in Australia right now. So they have had an experience of like not being in Japan, which is great. And I just hope that in the future we can have more of those opportunities, right? But the yen right now is in doing the best. So we good.
Yeah, it's a shame, really. I mean, I've seen some really depressing statistics about like the amount of Japanese people with passports and stuff like that. But it makes complete sense when you see how expensive it's gotten. You can't justify going overseas right now. I mean, it's just so hard, unless you're doing really well financially, of course. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, we'll see what happens with that, of course.
Right, exactly. But you never know.
Yeah,
I looked on it recently, trying to go back home, just taking me and the boys, the youngest two, and it's $7,000 for 3 tickets.
Yeah,
just the tickets. I was like, okay, we here for a little bit, and then hopefully something will turn up, and or the finances will increase to 2-3-fold.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really unfortunate, but it's good they have been able to have that get the perspective of seeing other places, and that see the various environments and stuff. So I think that's great. I don't know if that was part of your motivation, but at some point you made the switch from being an English teacher to now working as a front-end engineer. And I'm curious, like, I guess where that kind of initial idea came from. Like, was that something that you had kind of had in the back of your mind for a long time, where you were into tech and into computers and stuff like that? Or was it just kind of come to you a little bit later, and maybe you saw other people doing it and you thought you wanted to try it? Or like, what was like the inception behind the idea of like maybe becoming a software engineer?
A couple of things. One, more like amazed at my wife, because her creativity, when she can see something and she can just kind of think about it and just do it and like create, always astonished me. You know, whether it comes to artwork, whether it comes to what we're gonna do for dinner tonight. Okay, I'm gonna go bat 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 bat, and it's like something amazing. And I felt to myself like I have really good interpersonal skills. I really wanted something concrete, and I really wanted to be able to create something. So that was one of the first inception parts. And then another thing was like I wanted to kind of be able to be home more with the kids and with the wife and help out. So I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I kind of thought about some things, but then I saw a random Facebook post saying, you need to learn to code. These are free programs to help you do it. And so I was like, okay, well, I started with Khan Academy. Got my kids into like Scratch, started very little by little. And then I moved to like a jobs program that taught people how to code called 100 Devs. And that was the game changer right there.
Really?
100 Devs was the game changer. Leon Noel has created a fantastic organization which allows people from all backgrounds to learn how to become web developers. So initially the classes were all taught on Twitch, so 3 hours at a time. So I was really motivated. The time difference, he was in the East Coast time, I was still in Japan. So I started to watch them anytime I could, be live on Twitch from 6 to 9. Eventually, it's in the morning.
6 to 9 a.m., right?
In the morning.
Yeah.
So I'd be, on the train watching, trying to respond to questions, trying to learn it in the evenings. It kind of like the thought process, like, okay, I really want this, And so I had to kind of change a lot of the mindset of the things that, of how to get there. Because it's rough. It was a rough road, the trough of sorrow, as you're learning something new. So I think those were the big motivators. It's like needing to, wanting to create something, wanting to build something, and then just like, wanting to be home with the fam,
Wow.
This happened about the pandemic. And I think my company at the time, we got a couple extra weeks off because they wanted people to isolate. And I was like, I can be at home getting paid? So being in the classroom every day, I didn't have to go to the classroom every day. I didn't have to be on the trains. And I think that really like started kicking things into high gear. It was like, okay, well, I need to start to provide a different way, for the fam, so I can be here because I love it.
That's really interesting. So you got a taste of the remote work.
Yeah.
And then
that was
that helped get you even more motivated. It sounds like you had a good amount of motivation, though. It's like you were going quite deep and like, watching videos and stuff during the commute, interacting with the people on Twitch and stuff like that. I mean, you must have been pretty motivated to be able to, put in that amount of work. I mean, the absolute last thing I would want to do when I'm on like the commute, getting crushed by people in the, this train, right? But wow. So you, I guess you really decided you wanted to make this change, and you saw that software engineering was probably like the best way to do it, with maybe the least friction and like the most realistic kind of path that you had, and you made it happen through a combination of like Khan Academy and stuff like that. At first, it's just dip your toe in the pool a bit, and then it sounds like the 100 devs thing really
100 devs
took you to the level. Do you think that got you to the point where like you were like employable as a software engineer just through that?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
But so the 100 devs program covers lots of different things. One, it first starts with you learning how to learn, and so we go through courses about that. From there, we start to have our introductions into HTML and CSS. And then we take a step and we start to learn how to network. And so from after networking, then we go into the back end. And then we start doing, our final project. And so that's why it's a really comprehensive, overview. And for some people who have the privilege of time, up until a certain point, they can already start to freelance, from the get-go. It really does prepare you, step by step. It eases through it. We review lots of things, and just being able to have the community support you, because I think that's what normally lets people go to the wayside. For those people who try to start into a new career, a new endeavor, if you're doing it by yourself, it can be really difficult for some people. But if we're all struggling together, then you kind of, okay, we can do this. And then, so yeah, I think 100 devs, for those who go through the program, will for those who have the privilege of time, and for those who have the motivation to do so, can definitely be employable from 100 devs.
Wow.
And again, it took 100 devs was only the foundations. I was able to use the skills that I learned to eventually have my first remote internship before I even had this opportunity as well. So yeah, definitely 100 devs is the way to go.
Wow.
With that.
So you were able to get to the point through that where you could then parlay that into an internship. What was that? So, okay, you were still working as an English teacher and doing both at once at this point though, right?
So I also had another privilege because of Japan's wonderful welfare system. After my son was born,
right,
I could take a year off.
Okay.
And so luckily that also helped coincide with the 100 devs program, where after pretty much once the 100 devs program was finished, son was born, so then I can refine my skills. But again, still working with the skills I learned, especially when it comes to networking, especially when it comes to building my own projects. And so that led me to getting an internship at a place where initially I failed the interview. Yeah, it was crazy. I didn't think it was going to happen.
Okay.
So when that comes, I was interviewing for a position. I was still getting my feet wet into trying to get in interviews for dev positions. And when someone asked me a question, I was like, and I was kind of like struggling. I need to do that. And I just couldn't get the flow right. And during that time, even before I got to that technical part of the interview, I looked on the page and I said, hey, you guys didn't build I saw that you guys build it in this way. this is how I would do it. And I sent them a React version of their website, and how fast it was, because I think there was some loading issues that was going on. I was like, hey, this is how I would do it. I sent them that. From there, I had another part of an interview, and during the interview part, I like kind of choked. I was like, I don't know. I was nervous. People looking at me,
of course,
trying to watch me type.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't do it. They said, okay, you did well. There are other people who have interviewed who couldn't have gotten as far as you, but, thank you for your consideration. All right. So I'm still looking for jobs, and I see they posted another job posting for the React skills. And then I reached out to the person who I was interviewing with, like, hey, I saw at this company, or I saw on this website that you guys are posting this job opportunity. Is there any chance that perhaps, I could, help out in any way? And he says, you saw that? And he was like, hold on. And then he came back and he's like, can you start from this, from can you do this? And I was like, yeah, come on. And so then, that's how I got my first real taste of working with a community of engineers on a product. So that was my first internship, and that was my first real experience.
Wow.
Outside of my own personal project. Yeah.
Do you think that was
it's
right? I can see the common thread of the networking being very important, and I agree that's one of the absolute most important things. But also, do you think taking the initiative to do the React project and say, hey, here's this React version of this site that you have, I noticed these issues and I fixed them. Here's why I designed it this way, that kind of thing. Do you think that led directly to you being accepted then for that React position?
Perhaps, because and one of the things that when I sent my friendly email, I was like, you've already had this experience of my React skills, and I think they can connect those dots, So hey, live, you saw it. So I think that's what probably led to it. I guess I would recommend people who would to kind of take that extra step.
Exactly. I mean, anything you can do to stand out. And it's easier than people think, in my experience. The default way of applying to a job is literally to just send your resume and maybe a couple sentences or whatever in this, message box if they have one, or, that kind of thing. But that's it. It's a PDF and maybe a sentence or two about you and your name. And that's what companies usually get. So anything outside of that you can do, like a personal message, remembering the person, having a decent, kind of rapport with them from before, so taking the time maybe to just even build that in the first place, thinking ahead, maybe this, even if this particular job doesn't work out, maybe there'll be something down the line or whatever, and then being able to reach out to them and get a response from them because they actually remember you and have the positive, impression of you. And just asking too, right? At the end of the day, you had something you wanted and you told the person who is able to give it to you that you wanted it, right? And since you had taken the initiative with the React project previously, that they were like, yeah, this person stands out, from the pile of resumes that they probably had to, because that type of position probably does get quite a lot of applicants, but you stood out, right?
I would definitely recommend that. Yeah, taking that extra step. It's something I learned in Under Devs, being able to make those connections with the people. For all of the interviews that I've had been through me reaching out to them personally. I said, hey, I saw this, I connect with them in some way. I saw that you guys were applying for this position, a resume, maybe we can have a conversation or you get a couple times, have some time for a coffee chat, and then it kind of gets the ball rolling, I think click and apply is not the way to do it in this day and age, especially when once an application is posted, 100 people in 2 minutes have already applied for the so definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And also, you mentioned that you are a strong kind of communicator, and that you're able to make connections with people, and you have strong interpersonal skills, right? I think another big thing that you can do is be honest with yourself about where your skills are and where they're not. And if it's okay, I don't have the tech skills as much yet, I'm still kind of learning the tech side, but I'm strong in this, communication skills side, then use one to kind of make up for the other. You can always do that, You can always write a great message to someone or a cold email or whatever it is, if, writing or communicating is your thing, and maybe get over the hump rather than having to be the strongest one technically, right? So that, look at your skills and see what you can do to kind of cover for the ones that you may not be as strong in, I think is another really important lesson as well when it comes to hiring.
Right. It's kind of difficult to work with someone. I kind of have a balance. I try to have as much of a balance as I can. If I can only have interpersonal skills, but I have zero technical skills versus I have all of the technical skills and zero interpersonal, those two extremes don't make for a good, person to work with. So yeah, I think it's know your strengths and try to make up for whatever what you feel like you lack in.
Yeah, exactly. I have often found that the people with the best like hard skills are not the ones that are actually the most valuable engineers in the team, right? Because it's a group of humans at the end of the day working together, right? It's a team. So you really do need both. And depending on the type of work and everything, you might want more of one than the other. There are certain times when you do need like some relatively strict like hard skills too. But I think there's a lot more wiggle room than maybe a lot of people realize with regards to that. Like no one wants to really be working alongside like the engineer who's like amazing at like this, the technical side, but has no interpersonal skills at all, right? Like that's not really what makes like a true like top tier kind of engineer. I think it's really more about being able to communicate, and there's a lot of other skills and like soft skills that go into software engineering. It's not just the tech side at all.
Right, because you're making a product for someone, and eventually you might have to be face to face with someone. So you need to be able to navigate through those avenues, working with people. You can't just be behind your keyboard all day.
Exactly. I think early on, I do think it's important to establish like a technical base. You need some skills. Ideally, at least like one or two areas where you're like pretty like deep in, and then like you have like a decent amount of like overall kind of like tech skills. But then beyond that, I sometimes question like what is like the most valuable skill to then work on. It may very well be like more of like the kind of like sales, for example, or marketing, where you actually are able to look at your business and understand how they make money and like what the levers are to increase the amount of revenue that the business is making. Like an engineer who understands that really deeply and is able to like allocate their like technical resources toward the project in such a way that they're going to help the company make more money are so much more valuable than some like super like tech engineer who's just like 100% focused on like optimizing the code as much as humanly possible and just doesn't care about the business. Because like there are a lot of people who they just want to do their tech, be in their kind of bubble in like the engineering team and just looking at the code, optimizing things, and like they just leave the business stuff to the business side. I think there's a lot to be said for people who are able to just like kind of reach between different teams and like understand the business side, the corporate side, the whatever, marketing, sales more deeply. And I think that makes you a way more valuable engineer personally than like another hour spent trying to like learn a few more whatever functions in like the standard library or you know what I mean? Especially now with like the AI stuff and being able to kind of cover some of that as well, right? I mean, that's another question, I guess, is like, how AI is going to impact all this stuff. But do you have any thoughts on like, I guess maybe the direction of the industry now with like, I don't know, given all the new AI tools and stuff?
I would say it depends on what people's values are. For me, knowing that there are others who have a larger technical depth of knowledge than I do, I would utilize AI as a tool to help me lift that part of my knowledge up,
Okay.
And for those who are able to use AI to their advantage are those who at this point are going to be able to succeed. I think there's a resistance for certain groups of engineers who, at least at the beginning, maybe 2 years ago when ChatGPT first dropped, because ChatGPT then and ChatGPT now are two different GPTs, right?
Yeah.
And, regardless of if it might not do the best code all the time, it still is in a much better spot than it was. And if your goal is to get money, right? Certain things that engineers would, I guess, pride themselves on, if they're just going to stick with what they're used to and they're not going to try to adapt, and they're going to be left behind. It's kind of like, I guess, Netflix and Blockbuster, to be honest. How Netflix came through and, Blockbuster was still trying to do things their way, and then Netflix said, okay, don't buy me. And then now Blockbuster is bankrupt, right? So I think, it's the same for AI, and companies that are unable to now keep up with the pace of AI are probably going to be left behind. So those who are able to use AI well, and when I say that, it's like those who are able to get to understand how to write prompts as well as whether or not what has been received is correct. If you can do that, you're soaring. Yeah. There are those who can only use AI and they'll just say, okay, it's AI, it must be right? So then they just use it, and they can't really figure out how to talk to it in order to get it to do what you want it to do. Those are right now, those people who can do that are in a really good spot, and they can create more value than those who are just gonna be 100% coding and reject AI, or who can't, who are only going to use AI. When I look at the kind of projects that I kind of want to do in the future, I think I will probably utilize AI a bit more, because again, my value is just to make the money. Right. Because we out here, that's if I can create something that is able to put some extra income in the pocket that doesn't hurt anybody, then I'm just going to do that. Like, that's my value. Some people want to write it by hand. Hey, it's all good to you, but I don't know. It's just we're at a new age where you can't. It's here to stay, and it's probably only going to get better from here. And those who are able to utilize it to their advantage are the ones who are going to succeed. And those who aren't, they might either not succeed, or they just will have a much difficult time, going forward.
I think it's really interesting because I feel like there are kind of two kinds of software engineers. They're the ones who are really all about like the craft, like you mentioned,
right?
Where like they love coding for the sake of it, right? And they love thinking about code design and just making things faster and run better and look nicer or whatever it is, right? Just for the sake of it. And then there are software engineers who are more focused on reaching a goal, right? Like kind of utilitarian engineers where it's like, I want to create this thing. I want to will this into being, and code is the medium I'm going to use to do it. I think that second group are thrilled about the AI, right? And I don't know. I think I'm kind of in between the two. I probably lean more toward the second one, especially at this point. I think I have at certain times felt like a little pang of like sadness, to be honest, where I'm like, I used to be able to just like sit down and like with a terminal and just my own two hands in a terminal and like create something from nothing. And now like part of me feels like that kind of like magical experience of sitting down and building something from scratch just by typing into a keyboard has kind of been robbed of me now, right? Like it's kind of been stolen, and that's not going to be really a thing anymore. I mean,
you can still do it. Right?
You can.
I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can still get the same outcome, right? So you can still sit down and create something from scratch, but I don't know. It's just a little bit of a different thing now, right? Like you do it you're essentially telling someone else to do it. Right. Like, I feel like it's not really software engineering at this point. Like, or it still is now, but like it's going to get to a point where it's more like being a product manager, where you're like, okay, do this. I have this, like, here's the spec, build this. Right. That's what you're essentially doing now with the AI tools. And like, I've accepted that. And I think that it's like you said, there's no, like the horse is not going back in the barn. Like this is here to stay, and it's faster. It's better as long as you are able to like double check the output and stuff like that. So it's a tool that we should most people should be using at this point and are probably going to need to start using soon. If not,
you can't get it.
So like,
can't get away from it.
Exactly. So like, I'm not like saying we should get rid of AI or anything like that. I do have some, I don't know. I can definitely understand the perspective of like, I miss coding for the sake of it. You know what I mean? And like the craft that was coding, and that it's now not really as like, it's lost value now. Right. And because if you see yourself,
you still need people to code the AI though, right? You still need people to make the language models, right? So
that's true.
It has shifted. Normally what people would just make, they might make their own their websites, or they might make their own web applications, by hand. But now, I don't know. Now, like everybody can do it. So
that's true.
Now, how do you either utilize AI to help yourself stand out, or how do you change your skill set in order to compete with AI? Which I guess now the next thing would be, is focusing on language learning models,
That's a good idea. You can still ways, like if you want to be like a pure whatever engineer, you can become one who's like training the next generation of LLMs, or something like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Because I mean, as you mentioned, that it also does open up the amount of people who are able to build projects, whether it's like websites or apps or anything with code, because you're able to do it indirectly now. So I think it's going to give birth to a whole lot of new kinds of projects and stuff like that. So I think I'm definitely looking forward to see what everyone builds, now that everyone is kind of getting access to these tools.
And I think it's always interesting to see when some new technology kind of comes in to challenge the status quo. When I was taking Japanese in university, one of my Japanese teachers was quite strict on being able to use the dictionary to find the kanji that you're looking for by the radical. And I'm like, nah, man, I got my phone. And then I bet you, if they're given a random kanji, I could find it faster than you. And so I always run into those, being a millennial, we are always at the point where we're in between two phases. You know, I didn't, YouTube came out in what, oh 05, maybe oh 04, something like that.
Something like that.
So
yeah.
I saw pre-YouTube, pre-Google YouTube, but then my children have always had YouTube, right? They grew up with it. I started with the T9, right? Versus
Me too.
versus now they've got Google Pixels, right? So it's interesting to see, well, back in my day, I could type in my pocket.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's always just interesting to see the juxtaposition of what was and then what is now.
Yeah.
And there's always a resistance between, what is now makes it too easy to do the thing that once was. And for some people, who feel like I struggled, you got to struggle. It kind of makes them resistant to that kind of change. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But for me, I think millennials are always open to it, because of just how we have grown with the internet, So I'm oftentimes when I talk to people about AI, those people who are, been coding for twice my age, they're quite more resistant to say, but it gives the same feeling of like, I could find it in my dictionary better than you can find it with your phone. So eventually, I'm sure they'll stick with what works for them. I think those who aren't will just have to work a bit harder.
Yeah.
They have to change what was valuable to them. Like, what is it? The physical act of typing that is what you're in love with, or is it creating something? And does it matter how you get it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the mindset. You just need to shift and see it as a good thing. 'Cause it's like, hey, I used to have to do all this work to build this website or whatever.
Right.
Now I can just do it in like 5 minutes. Like, that's awesome. I can build so much more stuff now, right? And ultimately, that's what you were doing. You were building stuff, right? So
right. Yeah. And now that you have the foundation, let it do the boilerplate, and then you just add your own little flavor to it, right? And so that's how you really utilize AI to your advantage. You can't just be like, I don't like that because it's too fast. Or what happens is, like, people gain a skill and they work hard for that skill, and that the act of working hard for the skills is really it speaks to their ego. And like, they now little Johnny down the street who's 12 years old can build a website that when I was growing up, it took me days, weeks to try and get together. Like, I think that kind of also rubs people the wrong way, but it is what it is. Like, just accept, things are changing, and you can either go with it or be mad over there.
exactly.
Because
I think that's the core of it. It's like you put so much effort into something, and it feels like that thing has less value now, right? So like, it's understandable that it would be upsetting, but also the being upset about it doesn't change anything. And like, you got to kind of get on board or you'll be left behind, and then that'll make you even more upset, right?
Right.
So like, you can either change or like dig your heels in, and that's not going to help anyone at the end of the day, right?
My only I guess counter thought process. I accept how when I want to build something that AI can generate certain boilerplates, but I use it for coding. I respect those artists who have created works that AI is taking and utilizing in order to make somebody else money.
Right.
That's okay. You guys have a point. You all should be pissed because those people who have worked for that craft, and to have it stolen from them, and then to have somebody else make money from it, is not the kind of AI that we should be supporting.
Yeah.
And now, I think that should be where the conversation should focus. That's where the anger should be. Not that AI can help me build the thing that I want to build faster. It's that AI is stealing work from other artists and other creators and selling it.
That is, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, because that's another example of like, I mean, even if some court or whatever were to say, okay, this is copyright infringement, you're not allowed to do this anymore. Like, these models, you're not allowed to use these to create images. There's no going back, I don't think, from that either. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Maybe there'll be some way to, pay artists, for their work and stuff like that. There'll be something that comes out of it. I wondering how we're going to be able to avoid this situation happening where people are essentially stealing artwork from others, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that there's no going back. So you either have to pay people or you get sued, right?
Yeah.
But who is going to be the first to draft litigation to say that you need to pay these people for the work that this AI has, essentially stolen? Learn from it took works from other people and started using it, and now you have to pay for the company to generate that kind of image.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's all about that.
I agree. So we'll see. There's some ongoing lawsuits around that, I think. So yeah, maybe it'll just be like a one, case by case thing. You have to basically sue the person. And I mean, if as long as the courts agree that, the copyright belongs to someone, like it should be pretty clear cut in a lot of these cases, I think, especially if you're earning a lot of money from it and stuff like that. So yeah, I think something will happen there. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to police all of that though, because these tools are ubiquitous, and even, various countries have them and everything. So like even if the US is strict about it, other places will not be, right? So it's like the tech is kind of out there at this point, unfortunately.
I was gonna say like I thought about artwork, but I also thought about like music as well. How AI is using people's voices, right, to create music. And so does that mean do I have to copyright my own voice or my own likeness?
It's a great question.
In order to not be a part of this, in order to not to be a part of the model, that's what I'm curious about, how different models who, T-Pain's voices out there, or like Taylor Swift's voices out there, or certain people who have been passed away. Now you're using their voices to create music and getting paid for it. Now that's where the battle should be. It's like, okay, are you profiting off of me directly?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a whole. Well, I mean, it'll just be fascinating to see what the what ends up happening with that. But yeah, getting back to Japan.
We went with it.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, we don't have to follow a set structure or anything like that. But I am curious though to talk maybe a little bit more specifically about your work now, because you are a full-time front-end engineer. And first of all, you said you had the internship, but how did you actually find like the full-time position? Like how did you go about searching for that? And then what's it actually been like, making that transition from like learning on the side to, interning to then now having the full remote position as a front-end engineer? What's that like?
Many steps. My first was to create my own project and to start creating my own online presence. So after I finished my project and I was kind of really good about having an MVP about my project, I optimized my LinkedIn. I use resources like my mate, Danny Thompson has a good resource about how to optimize your LinkedIn for inbound traffic for recruiters. I've also had some mentors that I've met along the way through 100 devs who had been able to look at my LinkedIn and say, okay, you can do this, this, and this, and this, which these things would be allowing, having a banner, that shows pretty much who you are, optimizing your tagline to include the keywords that recruiters would be looking for, making sure that my summary is succinct enough that they don't have to click like view more, having those projects on there, which allow people to see some of the work that I've already done. From there, I've also had the 100 devs, we had a night where we all LinkedIn, you could, was it recommend or you could, what's that?
I forget what
endorse.
Yeah.
So we endorse each other. So again, that's part of the community, but nice. So from there, once the LinkedIn was optimized, then I was just getting recruiters like all the time. Like, hey, we've got the position. Would you like to look into it? And so there's some that I said no, thank you. But then there were others where I was working with this young lady who that person had asked, a little bit more information about myself. So okay, so we've got these opportunities, and said, hey, have I showed you this? It was in the current company. Have I showed you this opportunity yet? And I was like, no, what's this? And so I looked into it, and so I said, go ahead for it. And so I didn't think it would go the way that it did, strictly because the interview was in Japanese. And my polite Japanese level wasn't there, and so I was kind of nervous about it, but they were like, no, it's okay, let's just try it. So okay. And so after I had a kind of a casual interview with my my branch manager, just to talk a little bit about the company, and then from there we had a more of a technical interview where I sat down with part of the team, and then we had some behavioral questions, and then I had to live code something in front of them. And the live coding was to add and improve, implement a change to one of the projects that I had. And so I was able to do that with them. It was interesting. Yeah, it was really good. And I think it was the best interview so far, because in the previous interviews that I've had, they give you a question. It can be some random coding question. It could be their own take-home exam, but it's all from them, right? But when they asked me to improve something that I worked on, because I could be excited about it, I can talk about it, I can talk about motivations for why I did this, I can really, and even if, I still had the interview jitters, but I was a lot less, because I knew what I wanted to do. It was a project that I was really passionate about I was still building, but it kind of helped me feel a lot more relaxed. And then after that, I had an interview with the CEO and the COO, CTO. And then after that, they were like, okay, yeah, we'll welcome aboard. I was like, oh man. And that was after 2 years of searching.
Wow.
2 years from once I started learning how to code until once I got my first full-time opportunity we spent 2 years. That was during the job market where it was tanking, where Elon bought Twitter, fired all those people, then Meta fired everybody, then everybody just started firing people. So trying to get a job through that was the worst.
Yeah.
But hey, lo and behold, through some persistence, we made it. We here, and we not.
That is awesome. That's the key right now. I mean, you got to the next like kind of level. I mean, yeah, that's exactly. You don't want to fall back if you can, but that's not really a concern. I don't think. Usually, once you make it to that next kind of foothold, then you can keep going up from there, right? And so 2 years, that's a long time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, was that tough though? Like, did you ever want to give up or almost end up giving up, or like what kind of kept you going during that time? Because 2 years is a while.
Yeah, I luckily I had a bit of time to work on my craft during the paternity leave. But even after the paternity leave was finished, then I was still searching for jobs. But I think I had done it enough. I had gotten an internship, and then I was also still getting interviews, even though I wasn't passing all of them. It kind of made me feel like, okay, I'm close. I'm not there, but I'm close. So I think that sometimes I had to take a break for a week or two, and okay, I just need some time to let my brain reset. But like once the internship came, I was like, okay, then we in here. We have something to really write on the resume. That's not a project. We said you were with this engineering team and paid professionally as a software engineer. So okay, bam, so we're good. So then from there, again, it was just having the desire to change be larger than my fear of staying where I was at. Right. I just needed, especially now having the experience of being paid to work at home as an engineer, and to have the time with the kids, help, the wife, postpartum, it just made things a lot more succinct for the family. And so I guess I kept that going. That's what kept me going. And then, now we're here. Now we see the fruits.
Yeah. Wow. So you're working now 100% full-time, 100% remote full-time.
Mm-hmm. Full
So
flex
you're
too.
able to-
I can't go back to that either. That was interesting off the bat. Sometimes my internship, it was full remote, but like they had core hours from like 10 to 3, which is all right. It was all right for my first one. But then now it's like, okay, I can wake up in the morning, I can code, I can have my meetings, I can, make breakfast with the children,
Right.
get them ready for school, go back to the computer. It was the amount of, I didn't realize how much life I had lost on a train getting to
I
work.
see.
Right.
Totally. But that's awesome. I mean, you had a kind of an image of what you wanted to achieve, and it sounds like you made it happen. And that must feel really great, right?
Oh man, it still doesn't feel real. I still compare it. Like when I have a chance to like go out during the day, like I always reflect like, dang, I couldn't do this. I could not go to the dentist at 11 o'clock and it'd be okay. Right. And there's just so much of my free time and the health I just get back. And so it still feels surreal. Maybe after a year or two, maybe it'll calm down. Kind of like how, you first get to Japan for the first time. I feel like I'm like relearning Japan a bit more just because I have the time to do so. So yeah, it's amazing feeling. I would recommend it to anybody who's looking forward to trying to change or trying to get back a bit of time, or who wants to create something for themselves, or who wants to try something new. Software engineer is the way to go.
Yeah. And so you put a lot of time into your LinkedIn. Very smart, I think. That's where the recruiters are, right? If you want to attract them, making them come to you with like a better tagline and some endorsements and all that kind of stuff. Very smart. And then that interview process also sounds like a really great process actually at the company, because I've had some similar ones and those were always my favorite, where, I mean, actually, I don't think I've ever had one where they asked me about my own like projects. It's more like they present something that's similar to the kind of work that you would do day to day, and they'd say like, okay, how do you improve this code or whatever. Those were always kind of my favorites, rather than like the leak code thing where it's just like some random code, some algorithm thing, that I forget from like, from college or whatever. I never really enjoyed those as much. But then they actually, so did they essentially go on like your GitHub and find some project of yours, or maybe look on your resume or something to find a project and then show you some part of the code and be like, and basically ask you about it and try to have you like improve it in real time? Is that what happened?
So they asked me to submit GitHub.
Yeah.
They said, at first, and the initial, I just gave them my whole GitHub, and they was like, well, there's so many things on here, choose one. And so then I chose one of the social networking sites that I had built, that I'm still building. And then one of the things that I added to it was to try to have a share functionality,
Yeah.
And so then I had researched like a React share, just a package. And I just showed how I would implement that into my code, which is really, like I said, it was really good because not only could I talk about like the addition, I could talk about why I wanted to build this thing. And I think that also could showcase the communication, those soft skills, right? Played a part.
Totally. I think that's a good tip in general. Like have some code like that where like it backwards to front, right? You can talk about the decisions that you made when writing it. Even in like a live coding scenario, you could talk about like intelligent ways to kind of improve it and things you want to add to it and like kind of speak passionately about it because that can be super valuable. And that does happen where they're like, talk to me about some specific project that you built and like, they want to see your thought process and that were you to join their team that you would be able to kind of apply that same way of thinking about code and projects. Like they want to try to like picture you doing that within their code base and in their kind of projects and stuff. So being able to show that I think is super valuable. And it sounds like a really smart way to conduct the interview, and that you also did a good job of like selecting something that you were like passionate about and had like thought pretty deeply about, because a lot of people just don't really have something like that, right? Like they have example code or whatever on their GitHub, but it's, you look and it's like a bunch of boilerplate and like you can't find like the, like the real code. That's a problem actually, for like submitting just your GitHub. So like, any kind of like really non-trivial code that you can show that's like online running. Ideally, it'll have like users, or if it has like revenue, that's the absolute best, I think.
Oh, that's the
exactly
right there.
Like some people have actually paid for this. That's the biggest flex you can have, I think. But even if like even relatively small percent of a number of people are using it, it's like, we have like this small community and like they actually use it to do this, and like I'm working on it and I've added these things to allow them to do this. That goes so far in an interview. So
I think that's also what helped out a bit. By the time I submitted, I did have users for the product, and my GitHub also was, I optimized my GitHub too. It just looks
nice.
It looks nicer. Like I got my nice little markdowns, and just to make it look interesting. So all those things are trying to help you give you a little, make you stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, most people probably don't have that. Yeah.
I
don't think I have it, to be honest, because the GitHub README thing, I don't think it didn't become a thing until I was maybe already like not as focused on like finding a tech job anymore. But right now, if you are, it's a no-brainer to set that up and just give it some personality, and just maybe like some links for, like I said, to avoid the situation where like they load the GitHub and they just don't really know what to look for, and it's like, I see these like React projects or whatever, but they try to go through the code and it's just a bunch of like default boilerplate code and stuff. It's like, where's the actual like logic and stuff that this person wrote? They can't find it. They're just going to close it and probably throw your resume away, right? So like any way to kind of quickly get them to like the most important parts to show who you are, it's such a valuable way to do that, I think. So yeah,
definitely. I've got links on mine, which once you click on it, it just kind of gives you like different GIFs for how the project works. And so even without having to look through the code, you can just kind of see, okay, this is what's going on. So I would definitely recommend that as a way to just kind of make it easier for people to know quickly. Because, recruiters and people who are looking at your stuff, they don't take time.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really good thing going in terms of like the work hours and stuff. You're not doing any kind of overtime or anything like that?
None that I don't want to do.
Okay.
Right. So if I feel like I want to, if I'm in the zone, you get into that, there's none required. And so, but if I say, okay, I'm gonna stay a little bit longer, I need to work on this, so I'm gonna need to push this so they can review it in the morning, I'll do that. But there's no like, oh, you clocking out at 5? Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. Because I think that's one of the big fears people have when it comes to Japan, right? It's like the work culture. But it really just depends completely on the company, right?
Right. I'm lucky to be where I am.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it. I think it's a bit spoiled to have this as my first opportunity, just coming in straight off the gate and have this type of environment, because there are so many people who are probably still working for different companies, and it's just not as inviting, and as we're all focused on the same thing, and just trying to move forward together. It's a unique setup, as well as the benefit.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that your hard work paid off and that you found such a great opportunity. You are also maybe doing some stuff on the side as well, though, right? Like you, at some point, you were doing like some freelancing where you were like building websites for businesses and stuff like that. Are you also still working on that or no?
I stepped back from that. That was, I still would if, the opportunity comes through, someone, reached out to me, but I'm not like actively promoting, the freelance work because again, at the time I was doing freelancing while I was working full time, I said on site, I guess I should say. But now that I have the time, I'm trying to, have this opportunity. I'd like to spend more time just developing my own skills within the company and, going forward that way. But again, I don't mind the freelancing, but it's right now it's the site is there, if someone clicks on it and, they'll, and reaches out, I'll be okay to have a conversation about it. But, luckily it's not a necessity at this point.
Yeah. And then you also did some work with findadoc.jp, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And you're still actively working on that. What kind of got you into, because I remember when this first came out during the pandemic, it was a really great way for people to find information. It was about like the kind of COVID vaccine back then. I think it's evolved to now being like a way to just search for doctors who speak, whether it's English or whatever your kind of native language is, to help people in Japan who want to find doctors that they can actually talk to if they don't speak Japanese, or even if you do, like when it comes to stuff like medical stuff, right? You want ideally someone who speaks your native language, right? So it seems like a really cool project. And how did you kind of how'd you get involved in it?
When I was first trying to expand my online presence from what 100 Devs had talked to me about, I've opened up a Twitter and I was just looking for people, for software engineers in Japan. I reached out to this lovely young lady who was the creator of Find a Doc, and we were able to connect and just talk about, software engineering. She had a presentation where another engineer who works at Indeed, and the CEO of Code Chrysalis had an online like web forum about what it meant from transitioning from English teaching into software engineering. And I thought, okay, this is what I need to do, right? So I was able to connect with them, and they invited me onto the project. The person from Indeed has been like my coding mentor and has been fantastic in helping me develop my skills and the type of thought processes that I should have as an engineer. And the woman who has started Find a Doc has just been a wonderful support when it comes to just engineering in Japan. As someone who's not Japanese, as someone who's Black, someone who is trying to transition from English teaching to engineering with children. We was locked. So that they've just been, from there, I've been able to meet some wonderful people and network with some wonderful people who have tried to give me opportunities. Another person who at the time had connections at Mercari. Other people who I've joined the group have just been phenomenal coders that I've just been able to learn about and say, wow, the way you think and the way you're hard working it. He was like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I just code all day. I was like, okay, but you still awesome. So I think having that experience and working with them transitioned into me also, on the resume, working with Find a Doc, which also helped with this current opportunity that I have. So yeah, I think reaching out, networking and reaching out also for those people who have no idea how to get experience is one of the best ways that you can do. Finding some open source projects, which is one of the things that I learned from 100 Devs, to find an open source project. Okay. So yeah, that's how that turned out. Best. They've been the greatest people I've ever met in Japan, and again, through their efforts and through their support, they helped me get to where I am right now. So I owe a lot to them.
Wow, that's awesome. We'll obviously share a link to that in the description for anyone who wants to learn more or maybe get involved in the project, because that's awesome. I mean, that's, I guess, one big piece of advice for people, right? You want to find some open source. I mean, you mentioned also you had a mentor. Find a mentor, find open source projects to contribute to, make like real non-trivial kind of updates and, contributions to those if you can. Then you can, it's all like kind of a cycle, right? You can show it to the people during the interviews and talk, again, passionately about this thing that you're working on because you actually care about it, right? And you care about the people who are building it. And that is a great step toward getting, either a job or maybe better job. So I think that's great advice. But do you have any other like kind of advice that you want to leave people with, maybe if they want to make a similar transition from English teacher to software engineer, or maybe some other industry, or they just are interested in becoming a programmer? What other advice do you have, if anything?
Know what you want. Understand that it might take a while to get there, but through consistent steps, you'll eventually be able to get to the place that you want to go to. For those who have the privilege of time, continue to do so. Continue to focus on the things that you want to get in order for you to attain it. For those specifically who are trying to transition into software engineering, again, I definitely recommend finding a community of software engineers. Again, 100 Devs is a great community. I always shout out to Free Code Camp. They also are a fantastic community as well. For those who are trying to look to start learning how to code, find a doc, open source opportunities. Just start to change your environment to fit the goal that you want. For me, when I was on my phone, I made a whole Reddit profile just for software engineering stuff, related things. I try to change those. I try to get the thing that I wanted all around me, so I'm never losing focus of it. Because if you start losing focus on it, then it kind of falls to the wayside. But no, if I open my phone, it's software engineering stuff. If I'm on the computer, I'm either looking at Twitch for software engineering things, or I'm like doing some coding work. Like it kind of shift my mindset in that way. So just I kept software engineering all around me, and then I kept the goal in mind, and then I just took a little step to do it. Because I was, I said 2 years, but like I wake up at 5:30, study for an hour, eat, go on the trains, keep watching, so there are little bits every now and then. During lunch break, I finished the VOD, in the evening I would work, and I just kind of kept that consistently going through to eventually where I was able to translate those skills into something that was valuable to someone else, and then create this opportunity. So I think that's one of the best things you can do, is just keep it in mind, work towards it little by little, and then eventually you'll be able to get there.
Wow. Yeah, I think your story is a really great example of just like going step by step, getting to Japan, getting a job as an English teacher to kind of stay in Japan, and then, just kind of working your way up, right? And being very clear about what the next step is, what needs to happen, and then just focusing on that and just making it happen. I think it's a really great example of like how to kind of make it happen here in Japan. And I think, a lot of people can learn from what you've done. And if you have fewer than 4 kids, then you have no excuse. Right?
Exactly.
But 2, because you did it with 4 kids. So I think it's a really great, reminder to people of like what's possible, if you just are intentional about it, right? So That's awesome. I'm really glad that you've had the success that you've had here in Japan. I think you're a success story, what you can achieve as a software engineer here. So
thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's probably pretty much it. But I think that was some really great advice that you had for people. And I guess if anyone wants to reach out to you to maybe hear more about your story, or maybe get some more advice or anything, is there anywhere they can find you online?
They can always hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm open on LinkedIn. Oh, I hear some babies.
They're telling us to wrap it up. Yeah, sorry, we've gone over time. But so LinkedIn, so we'll definitely include that link, as well as to some of the projects that you mentioned, and kind of all your social media. So, but you're happy to accept messages on LinkedIn, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and then I guess the only other thing is, if you enjoyed this conversation, then please leave us a like, a comment, and absolutely do subscribe to the channel. And because we will continue to bring you more content like this, and more interviews and podcast episodes with software engineers in Japan. So thank you so much for joining. And I think that's pretty much it.